Prop 1 would give California more control over how monies from a voter-approved tax on millionaires are used, focusing on housing for homeless veterans, plus monies for mental health care and drug or alcohol treatment, essentially taking a lot of that money from the counties and giving it to the state government.
Voting, of course, still underway here in California. 1 hour, 50 minutes to go. But so are efforts to count early ballots. And while millions of Californians have already returned their ballots, election officials say early results indicate turnout for the primary is down from previous cycles.
With more on where things stand, we are joined by political data analyst and vice president of Political Data Inc., Paul Mitchell. Paul, good to have you back with us. Thank you for being with us. You put out data every single day that shows who actually is voting. So walk us through that data. Who's showing up?
Well, right now, about 18% of the electorate has turned in their ballots, but it is really, you know, the demographics really tell a story. 38% of seniors have already voted, only 6% of voters aged 18 to 34. In terms of the political makeup of the electorate, the Latinos are about 30% of voters, and they're only about 15% of the ballots that have been returned. And this electorate so far has been advantaging Steve Garvey, like you saw in an earlier piece here talking about that U.S. Senate race, because the Republican electorate is less than a quarter of the registered voters, but they're looking like about a third, around 32, 33% of the ballots that are getting turned in. So we're seeing a small, really skewed electorate to be older, whiter, and more conservative.
Well, let's compare. These are slightly below 2022, but not by much. How do they compare to that year, and what do you think that means?
Well, they are very similar to the 2022 gubernatorial primary election, which is historically the lowest turnout elections in California. Presidential primaries usually average higher turnout, close to 50% turnout in most presidential primaries. The challenge is that presidential primaries can be really high turnout, like 70% sometimes, and other elections, like in 2012, we saw only 31% turnout in an election that was very similar to this election because the Democratic president, Obama at the time, was not having a primary, and on the Republican side, the Republican race had already been decided before it came to California. And so that's essentially what we have now, is we have a presidential primary, but it's a little deflated in terms of the energy of this election because those top of the tier, you know, races of the presidential Republican and Democratic primaries are essentially non-issues right now for most voters.
You're not talking about like a Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama race or a Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders race, which draws a lot of people out. So let's talk about the things that are on the ballot. Proposition 1, Governor Newsom, this is his big thing, this mental health care bond. In terms of the electorate, what we're seeing right now, that can't be good for Proposition 1.
Oh, no, this is not the ideal electorate for that ballot measure, but even with this less than ideal electorate, the Berkeley IGS poll showed this right at 50%, which might sound like it's, you know, hanging on by a thread, but only 34% of voters were already deciding to vote no. So in the political calculus, you have a lot of undecided voters, and if they break, some for it, some against it, this thing should pass. If it does pass, it's really going to say a lot about the strength of Gavin Newsom as a messenger on a complicated issue that a lot of voters in California say is one of their top issues and one they've been really frustrated about around homelessness. So this is a real opportunity for the governor in a year where he's not actually on the ballot to show his political strength, essentially.
Well, your data seems to bode well for the replacement of Katie Porter in California's 47th district, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm understanding you correctly here, because this is really crucial for Democrats to win if they want a chance to control the House again. And Scott Baugh seems to be the front runner in this one.
Yeah, that is actually a very kind of bloody competitive race between those two candidates, Weiss and Dave Min. And, you know, we expect Scott Baugh to kind of float up to the top since he ran in 2022, and he had been in elected office in Orange County for decades. But we'll see how that race shapes up. And then north of you, up in Santa Clarita, we've got, you know, the race for the George Whitesides versus Mike Garcia. And even further up north, you have the race with
It'll be interesting. The control of the House likely going to come down to California in the fall, which is why it's so important to know who's on these ballots in the fall, which could determine that control, whether the Speaker of the House is going to be continuing as Mike Johnson or if Hakeem Jeffries gets that gavel. Paul Mitchell, thank you so much for your analysis. Check out his work, PDI. Really, really smart stuff.
Thanks for having me.